Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back for the first episode of a new book. Eats, Shoots, and Leaves is the name of the book. The book is about grammar, but it's very humorous, tongue-in-cheek. If you're kind of nerdy like me, I think you'll enjoy it. It's a good read. I enjoyed it the first time I ever read through it. This would be the second time I've ever done so. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and start in here with the acknowledgements. Thanks are due to many writers on punctuation who did all the hard work of formulating the clear rules I have doubtless muddied in this book. G.B. Carey's Mind the Stop, 1939, and Eric Partridge's You Have a Point There, 1953, are acknowledged classics. Modern writers such as David Crystal, Loretto Todd, Graham King, Keith Waterhouse, Tom Austin, Kingsley Amis, Philip Howard, Nicholson Baker, William Hartston, and R.L. Trask were all inspirational. Special thanks go to Kathy Stewart, Ann Baker, and Gillian Forrester, also to Penny Vine, who set me off on this journey in the first place. Nigel Hall told me the panda joke. Michael Handelsaltz told me about the question mark in Hebrew, and Adam Beeson told me where to find the dash in my keyboard. Learned copy editors have attempted to sort out my commas and save me from embarrassment. I thank them very much. Where faults obstinately remain, they are mine alone. Finally, I would like to thank Andrew Franklin for his encouraging involvement along the way, and the hundreds of readers who generously responded to articles in the Daily Telegraph, the Author, and Writer's News. It was very good to know that I was not alone. Forward. If Lynn Truss were Catholic, I'd nominate her for sainthood. As it is, thousands of English teachers from Maine to Maui will be calling down blessings on her merry learned head for the gift of her book, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. It's a book about punctuation. Punctuation, if you don't mind. I hesitated over the exclamation mark, and it's all her doing. The book is so spirited, so scholarly. Those English teachers will sweep all other topics aside to get to, you guessed it, punctuation. Parents and children will gather by the fire many an evening to read passages on the history of the semicolon and the terrible things being done to the apostrophe. Once the poor stepchild of grammar, is that comma okay there? Punctuation will emerge as the Cinderella of the English language. There are heroes and villains in this book. Oh, you never thought such could be possible. You never thought a book on punctuation could contain raw sex? Well, here is Lynn Truss bemoaning the sad fact that she volunteered to have the babies of Aldous Manutius the Elder, 1450 to 1515. Help! In the last sentence, does the period go outside the parenthesis bracket, inside the parenthesis bracket, or outside. If you actually know who Aldous was, you get the door prize and perhaps mistrust will have your babies. Aldous Manutius the Elder invented the italic typeface and printed the first semicolon. His son, yes, Aldous the Younger, was declared in 1566 that the main object of punctuation was the clarification of syntax. Ho hum, you say, or if you're American, big deal. Very well. You're entitled to your ignorance, but pause a moment, dear reader, and imagine this page of deathless prose, the one you're reading without punctuation. In the villain department, I think greengrocers get a bad rap. No, this doesn't come from mistrust. She merely notes the tendency to stick in apostrophes where apostrophes had never gone before. I feel no such sympathy for the manager of my local supermarket who must have a cheerful or a cellar full of apostrophes he doesn't know what to do with. Eggs, $1.29 a dozen. For heaven's sake, in the U.S., it's heaven's sakes. Eggs, and it's not even a possessive. Lynn Truss has a great soul, and I wouldn't mind drinking tea out of a saucer with her. When you read the book, you'll see what I mean, except that, on occasion, she lets her inner stickler get out of hand. She tells us of a shopkeeper in Bristol who deliberately stuck ungrammatical signs in his window as a ruse to draw people into the shop. They would come to complain, and he would then talk them into buying something. Then she flings down the gauntlet. He would be ill-advised to repeat this ploy once my punctuation vigilantes are on the loose. Notice my masterly use of the ellipsis? Hold your admiration, I owe it all to Lynn. I would have that Bristol shopkeeper knighted. Imagine the conversations in his shop. Irate customers skewering him on the points of grammar. You could write a play, a movie, on this shopkeeper. Track 'em down, Lynn. Bring 'em to London. Present him at court. On the second thought, present Lynn Truss at court. The Queen needs cheering up. And what better way than to wax sexy with Miss Truss over Aldous Manutius, the elder and the younger. Their italics, their proto-semicolon. Oh, to be an English teacher in the age of Truss. Frank McCourt, January 2004. Publisher's note. Lynn Truss's Eats, Shoots, and Leaves has been reprinted exactly as it was in the original British edition, complete with British examples, spellings, and yes, punctuation. There are a few subtle differences between British and American punctuation which the author has addressed in her preface to the North American edition. Any attempt at a complete Americanization of this book would have been akin to the effort to Americanize the Queen of England. Futile, and this publisher feels misguided. Please enjoy this narrative history of punctuation as it was meant to be enjoyed. Bone dry humor and cultural references intact, courtesy of Lynn Truss and all of us here at Gotham Books. Preface. To be clear, from the beginning, no one involved in the production of Eats, Shoots, and Leaves expected the words runaway and bestseller would ever be associated with it. let alone upon the cover of an American edition. Had the spirit of Christmas bestsellers yet to come knocked at the rather modest front door of my small London publisher in the summer of 2003 and said, "I see hundreds of thousands of copies of your little book about punctuation sold before Christmas," it will be debated in every national newspaper and mentioned, yea, even in the House of Lords, where a woman named Lady Strange, I kid thee not, will actually tell the panda joke. I'm afraid the spirit would have been sent whiffling off down Clerkenwell Road with the sound of merry disbelieving laughter ringing in its ears. "Lady Strange," he would have repeated, chuckling for hours afterwards. Honestly, what are these prophetic spirits of old London town coming to these days? Personally, I clung on to one thing when Eat Shoots and Leaves began its rush up the charts. Since the rallying cry for the book has been chosen pretty early on, I referred to it continually to steady my nerves and remind myself of my original aspirations, which were certainly plucky at the same time, not the least bit confident of universal appeal. Sticklers unite. I had written this rallying cry. You have nothing to lose but your sense of proportion, and arguably you didn't have a lot of that to begin with. There you are, then. My hopes for Eat Shoots and Leaves are bold but pathetic, chirpy but feet on the ground, presumptuous yet significantly parenthetical. My book was aimed at the tiny minority of British people who love punctuation and don't like to see it mucked about with. When my own mother suggested we print on the front of the book for the select few, I was hurt. I admit it. I bit my lip and blinked a tear. Yet I knew what she meant. I am the writer, after all, who once wrote a whole comic novel about Lewis Carroll and Alfred Lord Tennyson and expected other people to be interested. Oh yes, I have learned that lesson the hard way. I still have no idea whether sticklers are uniting in the UK, but I somehow doubt it, despite the staggering sales. Grammatical sticklers are the worst people for finding common cause because it is in their nature, obviously, to pick holes in everyone, even their best friends. Honestly, what an annoying bunch of people. One supporter of Eat Shoots and Leaves wrote a 1,400-word column in the Times of London explaining, with glorious self-importance, that while his admiration for my purpose was total, he disagreed with virtually everything I said. So I'm not sure my stickler chums are, as I write this, sitting down to get things sorted out. What did become depressingly clear, however, was that my personal hunches about the state of the luggage were horribly correct. Standards of punctuation in general in the UK are indeed approaching the point of illiteracy. Self-justified Philistines, get a life, are truly in the driving seat of our culture, and a lot of well-educated, sensitive people really have been weeping fiendishly in caves for the past few years, praying for someone, anyone to write a book about punctuation with a panda on the cover. I don't know how bad things are in America, but in the UK I cannot emphasize it enough. Standards of punctuation are abysmal. Encouraged to conduct easy tests on television, I discovered to my horror that most British people truly do not know their apostrophe from their elbow. I'm an Oxbridge intellectual, slurred a chap in Brighton, where we were asking passers-by to pin the apostrophe on the sentence for a harmless afternoon chat show. He immediately placed the apostrophe, oh no, in the possessive it's. The high-profile editor of a national newspaper made the same mistake on a morning show, scoring 2 correct points out of a possible 7. On a TV news bulletin, the results of a Vox Pop item were shown on screen under the heading Grammar Test, the spelling of which I assumed was a joke until I realized nobody in the studio was laughing. Meanwhile, well-wishers sent hundreds of delightful, horrific examples of idiotic sign writing, my current favorite being the roadside warning, children drive slowly, courtesy of the wonderful Shakespearean actor Timothy West. Evidently this sign, inadvertently descriptive of the disappointing road speeds attainable by infants at the wheel, was actually altered, but sadly not improved, by the addition of a comma, becoming children, drive slowly. Kindly exhortation, perhaps, which might even save lives among those same self-same reckless juvenile road users, but still not quite what the writer actually had in mind. By far the oddest and most demoralizing response in my book, however, took place at the bookshop event in Piccadilly. It is a story that, if nothing else, proves the truth of the depressing old adage about taking a horse to water. I was signing copies of my book when a rather bedraggled woman came up and said despairingly, "Oh, I love to learn about punctuation. Spotting a sure thing. You know how it is." I said with a little laugh, "Then this is the book for you, madam." I believe my pen actually hovered above the dedication page as I waited for her to tell me her name. "No, I meant it," she insisted, as if I had disagreed with her. "I really would love to know how to do it. I mean, I did learn it at school, but I've forgotten it now, and it's awful. I put all my commas in the wrong place, and as for the apostrophe..." I nodded, still smiling. This all seemed familiar enough. "So shall I sign it to anyone in particular?" I said. "And I'm a teacher," she went on, "and I'm quite ashamed, really, not knowing about grammar and all that, so I'd love to know about punctuation. But the trouble is, there's just nowhere you can turn, is there?" This was quite unsettling. She shrugged, defeated, and I hoped she would go away. I said again that the book really did explain many basic things about punctuation. She said again that the basic things of punctuation were exactly what nobody was ever prepared to explain to an adult person. I must admit, I started to wonder feverishly whether I was being secretly filmed by publishers of rival punctuation books who had set up the whole thing. I even wondered briefly, had any author of Hatchard's, a bookseller established in 1797, ever hit a customer, or was I destined to be the first? Throughout the encounter, I kept smiling at her and nodding at the book, but she never took the hint. In the end, thank goodness, she slid away, leaving me to put my coat over my head and scream. It was the same kind of strenuous apathy, I suppose, that I refer to on page 33, drawing on the deathless line of Woody Allen's Small-Time Crooks. I've always wanted to know how to spell Connecticut. I tend to feel that if a person genuinely wanted to know how to spell Connecticut, you see, they will make efforts to look it up. Or, failing that, if a book announcing itself as the only way to spell Connecticut is to be found in the heaps on a table in front of them, they will think, hang on, I might get this. But it turns out there are people whom you simply cannot help, because it suits them to say, with a shrug, do you know, I've always wanted to know how to use an apostrophe. And, oh dear, I don't know how to wash my hair either. The fact that these people are sometimes editors of national newspapers and Oxbridge intellectuals is just an indication of how low our society's intellectual aspirations have sunk. It is customary in the UK, incidentally, to blame all examples of language erosion on the pernicious influence of the US. Certainly American spellings are creeping in our shop signs. Glamour Girl. I noticed in a huge chain pharmacy over Christmas where it ought to have been Glamour with a U. But in the case of our deteriorating understanding of commas and apostrophes, we have no one to blame but ourselves. While significant variations exist between British and American usage, these are matters for quite rarefied concern. You say parentheses while we say brackets. But to people who call an apostrophe one of them floating comma things, it doesn't matter very much. They are unlikely to spot that American usage interestingly places all terminal punctuation inside closing quotation marks, while British usage sometimes picks and chooses, like that. People who identify that dot thing as a mark at the end of a sentence probably don't care that the American period is the equivalent of the British full stop, or that the exclamation point in the US way of saying is the US way of saying exclamation mark. We probably don't use the term inverted commas as much as we used to in Britain, but nobody in America has forced us to give them up. My American correspondents, however, have made it pretty clear that the U.S. is not immune to similar levels of public illiteracy. Carved in stone, mind you, in a Florida shopping mall, one may see the splendidly apt quotation in Euripides. Judge a tree from its fruit, not the leaves. And it is all too easy to imagine the stonemason slithering momentarily over the monumental apostrophe mallet in his hand, chisel poised. Can an apostrophe ever be wrong? He asks himself as he answers, nah, and decisively strikes home, and the chips fly out. Meanwhile, a casual drive in America is quite as horrifying to a stickler as it is in the UK. Children's home, reader's outlet. Please do not lock this door between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Might the tide turn, however? Are there any reasons to be cheerful on behalf of the punctuation? Well, there is one, and although modesty ought to forbid me from mentioning it, it is the astonishing response Eats, Shoots, and Leaves has had in the UK. Some may say that the British are obsessed with class difference and that knowing your apostrophes is a way of belittling the uneducated. To which accusation I say mainly, pah! How can it be a matter of class difference when ignorance is universal? Why should it only be the middle class people who care about the language? I come personally from a working class background, and I went to a state school, and there are many street traders in my immediate family. Punctuation is no more a class issue than the air we breathe. It is a system of printer's marks that has aided the clarity of the written word for the past half millennium, and if its time has come to be replaced, let's just use this moment to celebrate what an elegant and imaginative job it will be, job it did while it had the chance. Caring about matters of language is unfortunately generally associated with small-minded people, but that doesn't make it a small issue. The disappearance of punctuation, including words, spacing, capital letters, and so on, indicates an enormous shift in our attitude to the written word, and nobody knows where it will end. In the meantime, however, I suggest that we ponder the case of the defeatist bookshop woman and consider what she must be like to live with. I may even have to write a fictional character based upon her. I can see her now holding up the queue at an ice cream vendor explaining her predicament. If only one could get an ice cream from somewhere, but it's hopeless. Or standing outside Lincoln Center with a ticket labeled Bolshoi in her hand saying, if only I could see a ballet once in my life, but I suppose it's not to be. But yeah, that ends all the beginning of the book. After that, we'll be getting into the actual book, introduction and everything. But let's go over there's already some small jokes, if any of you have been really paying attention. Okay, forward. We've got a handful of jokes. Because they talk about once the poor stepchild of grammar, and then they've got in parentheses. Is that comma okay there? In parentheses, and then there's the comma. So just pointing out, yeah, punctuation's still kind of seen as a meh by a lot of people. Then, let's see, what else? Oh yeah, she says, at her local supermarket, at a supermarket, she heard of, that the manager at that supermarket must have had a cellar full of apostrophes if he didn't know what to do with, because he has put up there eggs, and it's spelled EGG, like egg would be, apostrophe S. What is the egg owning? What is the egg owning? That's the punctuation he set forth. Even though it should just be eggs, EGGS. And then they give the price, $1.29 a dozen. But yeah. And then she goes on, eggs. And it's not even a possessive where he put the apostrophe in. The apostrophe was not needed at all in that. So yeah, that's why she said he must have had a cellar full of apostrophes. Oh yeah, and a little later on she writes, they would come to complain, and he would then talk them into buying something. Then she flings down the gauntlet. And then they have an ellipses. If you don't know what an ellipses is, it's where you begin or end a sentence ... because it's not referencing the whole sentence, just a part of it. But it's ... He would be ill-advised to repeat this ploy at once my punctuation vigilantes are on the loose. And then she's got it in a quotation, not quotation, parentheses. Notice my masterly use of the ellipsis. So yeah. Let's see. But it's just some cheeky mentions, and the way punctuation is meant to be used. And even between American and English, one of the most common you see is the Oxford comma. In America, most people are taught something, comma, when you're listing like three things. Something, comma, something, and something. But I think the Oxford comma is something, comma, something, comma, and something. And it's these little differences. But yeah. But yeah, sticklers, you know, often people says technically it's But I kind of agree with her, because there's a lot of people who just don't know how to use their punctuation. You know how many times people screw up yours, YOURS. See. No, it's not S. It's your. There's your, 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 YOU apostrophe RE. What was the other one? I may be thinking of there. It may be there, because there's also there. There is the possessive form of there. Which is THEIR. Their book. There is the contraction of they are, which is there. THEY apostrophe RE. And then there's the location. There. THERE. I think I spelled that right, yeah. These, a lot of people may see that as, oh, you're being too picky, but that's what they're talking about when they're talking about sticklers, because sometimes it's just like, it's these little bitty differences. Know your stuff. And it does get on your nerves if, like, you understand how this is used. But that's not to get too upset, because, yeah, even someone like myself is like, it's not in the right spot. I screw up so much on sometimes writing on the computer and stuff, so yeah, don't feel bad. But yeah. Once wrote a whole comic novel about Lewis Carroll and Alfred Lord Tennyson. Two writers. Lewis Carroll, of course, the writer of Alice in Wonderland, and Alfred Lord Tennyson. I'm wanting to say he was the author of the Tarzan books. But anyway, yeah. Let's see what else we got here. An Oxbridge intellectual. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Says she was working on a, just as a goof show. It's like, but says, pin the apostrophe on the sentence. Yeah. Harmless afternoon chat show. He immediately placed an apostrophe, oh no, in a possessive it's. Which, if you know your English, there's an it's, I-T-S, sans apostrophe, no apostrophe in it. That, I believe, is the one that's supposed to be possessive. And then there is an I-T apostrophe S, which is, it is the contraction. But yeah, she's talking about newspaper writers and editors making similar mistakes. She's like, grammar test. It's spelled Grammer. There's not an E in grammar. It is grammar. Oh, goodness. Yeah. And I love this. I love this. She has people send in the signs. And talks about this one guy sending in a roadside sign, picture of it, that says, children drive slowly. And of course we know what it's supposed to mean. Children in the area drive slowly. But all they've got is those three words, no punctuation. Which in that case, what the sign is saying is that children drive slowly. While they're behind the wheel, they drive very slowly. It's not saying, hey, children, why don't you drive slow? And she's saying they apparently tried to improve it by putting a comma after children, which is now children, comma, drive slowly. So now you're telling the children, children, drive slowly. But yeah, like I said, I know this book won't be everybody's cup of tea, but I found it funny. Oh, goodness. The teacher who's like, how will I ever learn punctuation? And it's like, ma'am, that's what this book does. But yeah. She talks about the language erosion on the pernicious influence of the U.S., which, yeah. If you're not aware, the English language is usually divided into two forms. There's common British English, UK English, which is the language most commonly spoken by the people of the United Kingdom, by the British, the Scottish, the Welsh. A lot of other English-speaking languages, or English-speaking nations in the world tend to speak UK English because they often were colonized by Britain. Because I remember hearing one tell of a kid from India. I think he was taking classes in the U.S. And, he grew up in India, so British was something he had to learn. Or English was something he had to learn, but where they spoke UK English, he used UK punctuation and spellings. And apparently, the American teacher said his English was all wrong. It's like, he was just going by the English he had learned, which is technically correct. Before they were taken out by many English teachers in the U.S., many American English adapters and adopters, there were many words that were spelled very different. Color, neighbor. In the U.S., it's COLOR for color. But the way the UK had been spelling it for a long time and still spells it, COLOUR. Neighbor in the U.S., NEIGHBOR. And again, in the UK form of English, NEIGHBOUR. Yeah. And there's other differences in the use, the way words are spelled. But it slipped my mind. It's in the way the R and the N are spelled together in certain words. They're repositioned in the word. Oh goodness, it is just completely slipped my mind. I know there's certain words, but I can't think of a one right now. Anyway, I've already mentioned the Oxford comma, the difference of using it in your writings. Um, but yeah. And then there's again other little things like you have slight changes in what words you would use in certain positions in a sentence. But nothing so vastly different that it makes it sound like a completely different language. You're still speaking the same language. There's just slight alterations. But yeah, it's these kinds of differences. So yeah, that's why it's often said Americans are they it's kind of a very it's a somewhat different form of English to a lot of what the rest of the world speaks. Which is always why I find it funny when people are like, speak English. Which kind do you wish me to speak? UK English? Elizabethan? Perhaps Middle English? Or we can go back to the age of Germanic and Norse influences upon our English. Forthwith. There. But then she goes back to the woman talking about, I can't find a book that helps with punctuation. And she says, what if she had talked about other things? If she's at an ice cream shop and going, if only I could get an ice cream from somewhere. Or outside a theater saying, with an actual ticket to a ballet in her hand. Oh, if only I could watch a ballet somewhere. Yeah. There's nice little jokes. It's a lot easy. They're a lot funnier when you are in the midst of reading them because they're in the book. So if you understand how certain things work, yeah. I know at one point y'all heard me cackling through part of that early part of the book there, yeah. Because it cracked me up. It really did. I can't remember what it was. I think it was the eggs. The mention of the eggs, but yeah. Oh, goodness. Or it might have been the children. Drive slowly. But anyway, yeah. A long introduction episode. We look at the beginning. Next episode, we'll be getting into the actual introduction of the book, which itself is like 30 some. No, even longer. Yeah, 34 pages. So we'll probably be breaking it down into 2-3 episodes Although the pages aren't too long to read, so, which is good. But again, I enjoy it. The actual name of the book itself is a grammar joke. Because it's like, on the back it says, a panda walks into a cafe. He orders a sandwich, eats it, then draws a gun and fires 2 shots in the air. Why? Asks the confused waiter as the panda makes toward the exit. The panda produces a badly punctuated wildlife manual and tosses it over his shoulder. I'm a panda, he says at the door. Look it up. The waiter turns to the relevant entry and, sure enough, finds the explanation. Panda. Period. Large black and white bear-like mammal, native to China. Eats, comma, shoots and leaves. Comma's not supposed to be there. It's not that they eat, then fire a gun, then leave. No. It eats, shoots and leaves. Bamboo shoots and bamboo leaves. But by putting the comma in there, you've completely changed what is being said. And that's why I find it humorous, because it's like the whole children drive slowly. Children drive slowly. Children drive slowly. It should have been beware, watch for children, drive slowly. That should have it. Watch for children, period. Drive slowly. But no. No! Oh, goodness. They didn't put watch for. It was just children, drive slowly. Before that, it was children drive slowly. So yeah, again, this is already, episode has gone on long enough, but like I said, I enjoy it. I find it hilarious at points. I know it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but hopefully those who do like it will enjoy it. Anyway, as always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.